just realize that this is you. This is your essence. It doesn't matter what moment of greatness it is. You know, it's you. It's your essence. You're offering one of your unique gifts in that moment. And you may think that what you did was anyone could have done, but in that moment, it was your unique response to this particular moment, to this particular demand of the universe. And you showed up. And as you relieve this moment now, you're tapping into the felt sense of that essence, of your unique self, of your unique medicine.
Welcome, everyone, to the heart of the revolution. It is with deep joy that we are together today in one mountain, many paths. Our mission is what Barbara Marx Hubbard and Dr. Marc Gafni call a planetary awakening in love through unique self-symphonies. We are activating a new humanity and awakening as a new species, Homo Amor, the fulfillment of Homo sapiens. As a church, a synagogue, a mosque, a temple, a zendo, no one is excluded. Everyone is included, and we come together to attune to the evolutionary impulse awakening within us. Welcome home, everyone. It is so delightful to be together with each and every one of you for our 411th Global Evolutionary Gathering. I am Christina Tahal, the co-executive producer, along with Krista Josepha, Jamie Long, and Jacqueline Clark. And what a privilege it is to be held within this evolutionary community and to support, be intimate with, and to work for all of life's flourishing. On Zoom and on Facebook, in the chat, say hello and let us know where you're from. And do on Zoom, check that your chat settings say everyone so that we can all hear from you. Once we say hello, then we use the chat box for following the Dharmic conversation. What to expect today? First, the announcements, and then I will give a Dharma recap from last week's One Mountain. And then we continue our August symphonies with Claire Molinard and David A. Tan, who will both set the intention that we're working with, which will be followed by Suzette Mesa, who will resonate our evolutionary love code today. And then we step into our evolutionary sense making, again, with both Claire and David. And then we move into our confessions of greatness. And then to close, Krista will invite us deeper into community, and we will bring everyone on for a short dance practice and our goodbyes. Announcements. Starting in 2 weeks, from yesterday actually, Dr. Marc Gafni and Dr. Zachary Stein have decided to re-envision the upcoming Parallax course, and they're going to take a very deep dive into first principles and first values. This takes place in September on all the Saturdays from 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time or 5:30 p.m. Central European Time for an hour and a half. The new name is Value is Real. Why saying this may save our civilization and our souls. Marc and Zach will engage participants in a series of dialogues at the edges of human knowledge, where there is a dance between the languages of science and the sacred, and between the lineages of ancient wisdom and of our living memory of the future. Order the audiobook or the paperback on Amazon, and you can add also your voice into the symphony of this revolution by writing a review for First Principles, First Values on Amazon. Please do take a little time to do that. Claire Molinard, second announcement. Claire Molinard and David Cicerchi are launching the Unique Self Institute's flagship year-long program in October, Unique Self-Emergence. This transformative journey is a coaching program designed to help you uncover your unique risk and cultivate an integral practice that allows your unique self to emerge. Whether you're seeking personal transformation or certification to facilitate unique self-emergence with others, this program offers a profound opportunity for growth. Schedule a call with David to explore if this life-changing experience is the right fit for you. The link is in the chat box now. And today, we're going to hear all about the unique self process with Claire and David. I welcome all who are new. If this is your first time, these teachings do stand on their own, and every week does build on the previous week's teachings. We encourage you to explore our YouTube, our Medium, and our Substack platforms, and to read or listen to our books in the Great Library. Trust the magic ways the Dharma comes through your understanding. One mountain, many paths is radically committed to telling the new universe story. Now for the recap from last week's August Symphony. Wars through the lens of cosmoerotic humanism, opening our hearts to Ukraine with Dr. Elena Maslova-Levine. In the August Symphony of Cosmoerotic Humanism, we are exploring how to live cosmoerotic humanism, how to bring its principles and values into our daily lives, and how to respond to its challenges as homo amor. Brings tears to my eyes. This is easier said than done, especially if the outrageous pain is not right in front of us, nor even in the daily news vying for our attention. Dr. Elena asked, how can we respond with outrageous love to wars raging in other countries? How can we accurately understand what's going on in today's information ecology with its abundance of fake news and covert and not so covert propaganda? Does this understanding the stories we tell or don't tell ourselves about these distant events even matter? She explored these questions by looking at the Russian aggression against Ukraine, a war raging on for more than 900 days, and made it painfully clear that our attitude, our attention, our inner response, our ability to live the new story of value matters so very much that how we do this can actually decide the outcome of the war and change the course of history. We are literally in the information war zone. Our minds, the public opinion of the West, is one of the major battlefields of this war because the stories living in our minds matter enormously. We like to think that the so-called center of gravity of modern Western democracies is world-centric. This is one of the dignities of modernity. But here is a major lesson of this war. Had it been true, it is not just that our collective response to the war in Ukraine would have been different, but this war would never have happened. If Russia knew that we collectively would respond to this war as if it were waged against us, which it actually is in ultimate analysis, it wouldn't dare to try to invade Ukraine because the collective resources of the West are incomparably more than Russia's. But it is not really true, at least not fully. That's why, for example, Biden's priority not to let American troops be involved in this war in any way feels right to him and so many Americans. American lives matter more to Americans than Ukrainian lives. This is just the way it is. The center of gravity of the collective is directly determined by the center of gravity of individuals. Even though each individual's contribution might seem to be minuscule, Living the new story means then doing our best to transcend these remnants of ethnocentricity. How? To begin with, by noticing them, by making them object, noticing when we act and feel from the ethnocentric level of consciousness. Because truly shifting to world-centric intimacy, both individually and collectively, is, Elena proposes, precisely the evolutionary leap called for by this crisis. Elena showed that the war in Ukraine can be seen as a war between the past and the future, the old story and the new story, Russia and Ukraine. And it takes unusual circumstances to break away from the past and respond to the pull of the future. And even then, it takes personal effort, which comes easier to some and more difficult to others. This means that this fight between stories very obviously takes place within every one of us. Through her crucial new form of discourse, writing and thinking and feeling that takes places as an expression of the cosmoerotic universe in person, Elena clarified the field of Eros value and Eros desire as they appear in the terrible theater of war, demanding, with humility and audacity, our attention, energy, and action, understanding that there is no split whatsoever between policy and Eros, that indeed a policy of ethos can only emerge from the field of Eros. Now, I invite us to more deeply enter into the holy and sacred spaces of one mountain, many paths, and I turn my word to you, Claire Molinard.
Thank you, Christina. And hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today with David. And together, our intention is to share about the role of practice in embodying the new story. And hopefully to inspire you to engage with practices that can activate your unique self-consciousness. So we're going to share about how, as unique self-coaches, we work to facilitate and activate one's awakening as a unique self. We'll share about our program, Unique Self-Emergence, and how that program serves that purpose. And more importantly, we'll share about a wide panel, a wide range of practices that when you engage them regularly, they have the potential to bridge the gap between understanding unique self theory on a conceptual level and truly embodying that consciousness in our very being. Because eventually it's all just words until we bring it home, until we find it into the fabric of our very lives. So hopefully today will inspire you to practice. And the unique self-emergence process addresses very specific questions that are universal to all human beings, that are the questions at the core of the new story. And these questions are a version of these three questions. The question of who am I? In other words, what is the source of my aliveness? Another question is, what is the meaning of my life? And a third question, what is my life purpose? What am I here for? And as you know, these questions are at the core of the new story that's been developed by Dr. Marc Gafni and his colleagues at the Center of World Philosophy and Religion. And the new story is a response to these questions. But again, these responses are not just conceptual. They're questions that we must live. They are central to our sense of unique self. For example, when Dr. Marc Gafni asks, who are you? And he responds, you're a unique expression of divinity. These words, as inspiring as they might be, they need to be embodied, they need to be felt for it to create the transformation. So that's really what this presentation is going to be about, is how do we bring this home? And I'm going to pass my word to David now, who is going to explore how human beings have been attempting to answer these questions. So David, over to you now.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everyone. It's so good to be here with you, Claire, and with everyone on One Mountain today. It's also really great to be here with Christina. I'm visiting Christina's house, so this is a familiar background to many of you. And also, before I jump in, I just want to step back and presence. I see Bob Rudy, you're here with us. Bob, you're a beloved partner to Becca, who just passed away. If anyone here hasn't heard, passed away a few weeks ago, and we're just holding you in our hearts as we go through our One Mountain today. So let's take a step back, right? These questions that Claire brought up, right? Who am I? What's the meaning of my life? What is my life for? What's the purpose? You know, there's so many ways to respond to those questions. And certainly when we face kind of the end of our life, the questions come up with a particularly strong force, or we experience whatever face close to death. It always brings up these questions here. And every day we're actually living these questions, whether we realize it or not, consciously or unconsciously. These are questions that we actually orient our life around, right? And so today I want to offer 3 of the common responses to these questions, okay? And as I describe them, maybe we can find parts of ourselves that are living within these responses, and so we can sort of develop some awareness around them. So the first response, the first common response to these questions is what we might call the separate self response. The separate self response, and each of these responses is a response within the context of a particular story, right? And so the separate self response might be a story, something like, I'm alone in a meaningless world. I'm separate from the whole, and I have to prove my worth, my value through external symbols and external status, right? So my focus is on accumulating titles, recognition, wealth, or status here in this world through many forms of ventures that is supportive of the ego's sense that I exist, right? Now, the advantages of this response is really important to notice, right? Because sometimes we demonize the separate self, but the advantage is that actually we feel a sense of independence, of self-reliance, right? And actually it helps us develop a capacity to survive in this world, right? We have an identity in the eyes of people in the conventional world that actually is supportive to our survival, right? Now, the pitfall to this separate self response is that we can get stuck in endless cycles of craving and continue to feel alienated from the rest of reality and never really feeling fulfilled, right? So we actually perpetuate cycles of suffering. Now, the second response we might call the traditional religious response. And that response is within the context of a story that's something like, it's all up to God, or there's this mysterious reality that's beyond me, that I'm nothing, right? And the only true way is to follow that God, follow that path of that which is beyond me, right? And all of this is some sort of an illusion or fallen state. The advantages of this traditional religious response, and sometimes I think certainly in communities around me, this is sort of poo-pooed a little bit, right? This response, but there's an advantage to this, right? The advantage of actually embracing some sort of religious tradition is that it offers a time-tested set of practices and wisdom and a structure, right? And a path that actually provides stability and community, right? And a coherent ethical system that's integrated in terms of how we live our lives, right? So maybe we can find ourselves either pushing away from this response or embracing it in some parts of our lives. Now, the pitfall is maybe more obvious to some of us, right? But the pitfall is that we risk falling into dogmatism. We get stuck in these archaic forms of religion that are ethnocentric. It's only my people, right? They're sexist, right? The men, kind of rule the women, right? Or homophobic, right? Gays don't belong here, right? Or some sort of anti-body orientation, anti-individuality even, right? So kind of a classic example of seeing how this happens is that, the children of hippies who had never grown up with any particular religion or order, they fall back to some sort of traditional religion, but maybe more in a fundamentalist form, because it offers clarity and certainty and order that they never got when they grew up, right? So this is the second response to these questions of who am I, why am I here, what am I here to do? The third response that may be more familiar to a lot of us, I know it's familiar to me, is what we might call the alternative spiritual seeker response, right? And the story that drives this alternative spiritual seeker is something like, it's all relative anyway. And so I can make up my own story. I can create my story. It's all up to me. In a certain sense, I am God, right? Now, the advantages of this approach, this response, is that we actually do cultivate a freedom, right? And we can explore a wide range of spiritual practices and personalize one's journey of transformation without the baggage of some of the downsides, the pitfalls of traditional religion, right? So we might be able to go to a breathwork workshop one day, and the next weekend we maybe go to a psychedelic medicine journey circle, and maybe the third week we might go to some kind of new age human potential workshop. And in every experience, we might feel so much, awakening experiences, right? Now, the pitfall to this response is so important, though, right? And this is sometimes hard to see. I know that where I live in the Bay Area in California, sometimes I have to really look carefully to see the pitfall of this. And the pitfall is that this can lead to superficial engagement, right? Some sort of spiritual bypassing of genuine transformation that needs to happen, right? And maybe because it doesn't require obligation or commitment, we can simply go from one altered state experience to another without experiencing genuine transformation and identity, right? Also, since kind of creating my own spiritual path means that I can sort of eject anything that I don't like, even the ethical binding, the ethical guidelines that would drive a life, I can really just, create something that's comfortable and enjoyable for me. But again, there's some superficiality to it, right? And so we end up perpetuating cycles of suffering. And so these three stories, right, the separate self response, the traditional religious response, and the alternative spiritual seeker response, they all perpetuate suffering, actually. They all perpetuate some version of suffering, or they outsource the suffering onto others and for the sake of some sort of comfort, right? But what is it that we all want? In all of these stories, what we really want is to feel radically alive, right? To feel our aliveness, to discover meaning in our lives, and to live a purpose-driven life. That's what we all want. So the root cause of each of these stories, impartiality and continued perpetuation of suffering, is, as many of us know, and we talk about this all the time, is about a fragmented story, a partial story of what it means to be human, right? So it's either I'm alone in a meaningless world, or it's all up to God, or it's all up to me. But in any case, there's a very partial response, right? So in this one mountain, we're going to go through the simple yet powerful framework, right? And the new story of unique self, and then the set of practices that go through with it, which we call unique self emergence, which can actually cultivate consistently a life of aliveness, meaning, and purpose. Because here's the thing, and this before I send it to Suzette, who's going to resonate the code, here's the thing, right? The more we try to gratify the separate self's craving and drive for status, recognition, and wealth, the more we're left wanting more. Going back to traditional religious communities and practices causes other problems, right? Because unless we hold a larger world-centric vision at the same time, these religious traditions will end up cutting us off from the modern world and from our own actually fullest potential. And seeking out alternative spiritual paths and values doesn't ultimately work either, because, paradoxically, the more we try one new spiritual program or workshop after another, the more we try those, paradoxically, without a coherent story, the more we perpetuate that separate self's endless attempts to cover up this sense of the void or emptiness and actually declare that I exist, right? So Dr. Marc and Claire founded the Unique Self Institute in order to provide that story, and that actually integrates the best of the stories that we have, right, for the contemporary seeker. So those who want to feel radically alive, discover meaning and purpose, right? So what's the new story? Well, Suzette's going to resonate the code, which is part of the new story around what it means to be human. Who am I? What's the meaning of life? And what's my purpose? So Suzette, go ahead and resonate the code for us. Thank you.
Thank you. The answer to the question of who are you is you are a unique self. You, an irreducibly unique expression of the love intelligence and love beauty that is the initiating and animating Eros and energy of all that is, that lives in you, as you, and through you. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzette. So that's, the code is so powerful that if we really let it sink in, it will just blow our hearts open, blow our minds open, right? So let me get into story now. We talk about story. Let me tell you a little bit about my personal story of unique self and unique self emergence. Are you interested? I'd love to share it. So prior to being introduced to unique self, I was actually living a traditional Catholic story. I mean, albeit kind of the mystical side of Catholicism, but it was a story that really downplayed my own needs and desires, right? The mantra was, God is indifferent, and my purpose is to surrender to God and actually trust that God will provide, right? There's that sort of sense. So I didn't matter as much, my needs didn't matter, and my purpose was to surrender, right? And trust that God will guide me to the next step. It was a beautiful state experience, and in many ways, a beautiful life. But in order to keep myself in that state of surrendering, I had to continuously focus on meditation almost to the extreme, right? I was trained in, first I went to kind of a Taoist meditation. So ironically, I was Catholic, but I did find other meditative disciplines, right? And prayer methodologies. I was trained in transcendental meditation. I even used these brainwave entrainment technologies. Maybe some of you have heard of these. HoloSync was one of them, where it actually stimulates a meditative state in your mind using technology. iAwake is the more recent one. I think it's a little better. But anyways, I was using one meditation technology after the other to keep myself in a state of surrender. But of course, it was impossible to always be in that state. So somehow I was still anxious all the time. I was actually disconnected from myself, my needs, my desires, my sexuality at the time. And it was very unstable and unsustainable. I actually learned or started to realize that I use these spiritual practices to bypass my deeper underlying discomfort with myself and with others. right? So at some point I realized this is not sustainable, and this is not, there's something missing in a life that I wanted more wholeness, more connection, more integration. I was introduced to Dr. Marc Gafni and the Unique Self teaching. And for the first time, my story opened up, that I realized that my entire being is meant to be here. I was intended, that my wholeness was actually what the universe wanted, what God wanted, right? God didn't want me to simply bypass my needs or repress my desires. Quite the opposite, actually. But it wasn't until I met Claire and then eventually went through the unique self-emergence process in 2021 that I really was able to start embodying this new story, okay? I was able, through all the different practices that we went through, and it was actually a very systematic practice regimen, kind of unfolding slowly, I learned I could stop thinking that the next spiritual practice, the next thing would finally bring me peace. And actually I could befriend my inner self, all these difficult, uncomfortable emotions. I could actually listen more closely to my needs and my desires. I invited compassion in, and I was able to really be with what was and what is, what comes up. So for example, I had a persistent, we call it false self voice in me, that I don't belong. I don't belong in this world. I don't belong in X group, whatever that is. And so often I had a tendency to, whenever I felt discomfort, feel this justification like, oh, I don't belong in this group. And I would push away from the group, and I would be continuously moving or somehow avoiding something with groups that I was a part of. And through this process, probably one of the most dramatic impacts on me is that I was able to kind of metabolize that voice and sit with it and actually be in it and transform my relationship to that false self. And then instead of pushing away from groups because I don't belong, actually lean into groups and see that I can change. And by leaning into the group, belonging was actually a natural process, and that I belong in the reality itself. So any group I'm part of was also part of reality, okay? Another major impact that this program had on me was it clarified my unique risk. Now, I know we talk about unique risk a lot in One Mountain, but it wasn't until this process that I was able to bring together, with Claire's support and coaching, a coherent image of and a vision for how life was calling me to show up. And one version of what I call it is, and what Claire calls it, is a steady alchemist. So I'm able to be steady in the discomfort and all different kinds of experiences, and able to alchemize whatever is going on in life for an evolutionary relationship to reality, right? So that's something I still go back to almost every day, actually. And the third impact that I had was with my clients. So I'm a coach and a unique self coach as a result of this certification. And it actually provides a psychoactive framework and a set of tools and practices that really enabled my clients and have enabled my clients just to open up and wake up and find their center. So I'll give you an example. One of my clients, she's an executive director at a nonprofit. And I worked with her, and I offered her this practice called the false self-observation practice. And in a very high performance environment, she is often driven to exhaustion, right? And she tended to overwork herself, doubt her own choices, and be really confused a lot of times, right? And so through this practice that I learned with Claire, she was able to find her stillness and discover her inner authority, and actually start to discover, oh, I have wisdom to offer, and I can trust that wisdom for the sake of responding as an evolutionary. And she actually uses that framing, I'm an evolutionary, to work with her organization. So instead of feeling alone and anxious, she now can transform and transmute that experience to be in partnership with this mysterious yet accessible evolutionary cosmos. It's a very practical way to use this coaching. So before I turn it to Claire to tell you about her story, I'll just share that overall, through unique self-emergence, it's enabled me to find my grounding, actually open up to more and more aliveness more of the time. And I would say the biggest thing is I've learned to trust my intuition and trust reality that that I'm not alone in this, right? Even though I feel all the time I face outrageous pain and all the different emotions, there's a sense in which I can trust reality will walk with me as I continue my unfolding journey. So Claire, let's hear about your unfolding journey and how you came to bring forth unique self-emergence. I turn it to you.
Wow, David, thank you. What a beautiful story. It's so inspiring and so touching. And I feel so blessed that I walked a little part of it with you. Thank you for that privilege. Yeah, so my story, and I'm going to focus on how I came to unique self-emergence, the unique self-teachings and unique self-emergence. So my spiritual quest started quite young. I was 19 when I was struggling with anorexia and various forms of addictions. So that put me into a healing journey and brought me to discover traditional Chinese medicine, which was my first entry into a holistic thinking form, which was a revolution in my mind and such a revelation of what I was looking for. So I began to explore the Taoist teachings and ways of healing, which led me to explore other alternative healing forms and modalities, and led me to practice yoga and meditation. And so in my early 20s, I took refuge in the Buddhist tradition, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So I began to explore the Tibetan teachings, beautiful teachings. So I was, in a way, in some way, I embraced a traditional religious path. That's one of the story that David introduced earlier. And so for some time I was with the Tibetans, and then a few years later I took refuge in the Zen Buddhist tradition. And for years I was a relentless seeker and practitioner. I was obsessed with the idea of waking up. What does it mean? How does it feel? I wanted to wake up. It was an obsession for me. And while I was deeply immersed in that tradition, I was also very curious to discover the latest New Age teachings and explore all kinds of therapeutic and coaching modalities. So I was an avid seeker and pretty much stuck in all three of the stories that David introduced, the separate self story. I was in pain. I was seeking and not finding. So I was practicing, and it was that journey of being a seeker. And so I was immersed in the tradition, but I was also seeking as a New Age practitioner. So I was embodying a version of all three stories. However, at age 40, I had a profound awakening experience, which revolutionized my sense of being. And for the first time, I felt that I had touched the essence of my true self. And for some time, it brought me a deep peace. And I was no longer seeking. I was just sitting. And it was delightful and an incredible experience at the time. But of course it faded away, and the deep peace I had found within actually gave way to even more questioning and even more longing. And for a couple of years, I went through a very dark night of the soul where I was haunted by the question, what's the point of waking up? if there's nothing I can do, if the world is not changing around me, yeah, what's next? How do I participate in creating more peace and more love and healing the world? If I wake up and there's nothing I can do, what's the point? And so that was very, I was lost and overwhelmed with this question. Yeah, for me, waking up had actually opened up a yearning that felt even more urgent than my longing to wake up. And none of the paths that I had found were able to point me to what's next. And that's during this period of disenchantment, total disenchantment, that I discovered the unique self teachings of Dr. Marc. It was in 2012, the book came out, I bought it. And by then I was a practicing integral coach. I was applying Ken Wilber's integral theory into my work. And the unique self theory, with its emphasis on spiritual activism, its emphasis on deploying one's unique gifts as one's unique contribution to heal the world, really resonated with me. I found Marc, I began to study with him. And in 2013, he invited me and my dear friend and colleague, another integral coach, Barbara Alexander. He invited us into to develop, he asked us to create a unique self-coaching modality. And so we developed a program that combined the unique self-teachings with the integral coaching methodology, which uses cutting-edge transformational tools such as immunity to change, the Enneagram, quantum psychology, and many other modalities. And we weaved these tools together to create the coaching modality that in some way we were looking for and never found. So we had to create it. And it was a coaching program that addressed the topic of all topics for us, which was, how do we awaken as a unique self? It was our coaching topic, to emerge as unique self. So that became unique self-emergence, the process that we designed. And unique self-emergence is a psycho-spiritual system that integrates those multiple approaches and a set of practices that comes together as a coherent and dynamic path to awakening as unique self. And what we discovered over time by coaching people and training people in this modality is that unique self-emergence is psychoactive. It actually works you as you work it. Once you go through the process once, it keeps working in you. It's embodied and it starts to, it works you and it remains with you as a way of being long after you've done the process. That's the cool thing about it. And so Barbara and I taught the system in person trainings between 2014 and 2019. And we trained coaches and therapists, healers, all kinds of professional helpers. And they loved the process because they could easily adapt it and use it in whatever modality they were using, whatever modality they were offering. So it's a very easily adaptable process. It's a set of practices that you can embed in whatever you're doing. And so then we stopped offering it around the period of COVID, and Barbara went her own way. And I continued to work with the process with private clients until today. So over time, there has been some changes, and the process has evolved, but pretty much the core of it remains the same, and the process continues to evolve as we use it now with David. So when when Barbara left, I felt, and COVID hit, with all the structural changes that happened through COVID and the need to go online, I really felt strongly that the future of unique self-emergence was not in-person trainings, but in an online setting. So when David came David came in the field and he began training with me as a unique self-coach, it became quite clear to me that he was bringing a lot to the table as a long-term student of Dr. Gafni, as a skilled vertical developmental coach. David was a solid practitioner, and so when he became certified, we decided to join our forces and to bring the training in this new online format. So that's the story of the unique self-emergence process. And we're excited to bring this approach now to helping professionals that are interested in bringing a solid psycho-spiritual dimension to their work or to their personal life. So unique self theory provides the responses to the questions that we have around our source of aliveness, meaning, and purpose. And you can think of the process, the unique self-emergence process, as the corresponding technology to embody these questions, to actually live these questions, to embody aliveness, to embody meaning and purpose in our lives. So I'll share much more about the ways that we access aliveness, meaning, and purpose through the process. But I'm going to stop here now, and we'll return to David, who is going to first explore some of the more challenging, hard ways that people have tried to embody these qualities of aliveness, meaning, and purpose. So David, over to you.
Thanks, Claire. I love hearing your story, and I love how both of our stories really complement each other, and both of our skill sets and capacities complement each other, right? And so we're a great team in that respect. So we've been talking about the questions and the stories in response to the questions, and then we shared each of our individual story. Now we're going to transition into practice, and we're going to transition into what do people do in an attempt to experience their aliveness, meaning, and purpose, right? But first, I want to share what are the hard ways that people do this, right? The hard ways, the three hard ways that often people attempt to do it, but aren't fully able to. And then Claire will go into the unique self-emergence, actually the pillars of what makes unique self-emergence process. And by the way, we're going to probably go a few minutes later than the hour, but if you stay till the end, we're going to actually have everyone participate in one of the core unique self practices. So you're really going to want to stay for that. All right. And by the way, also, like we said earlier, it may sound like we're persuading you to participate in unique self-emergence, and I'd love for you to join for sure. But really, it's about persuading everyone to practice, right? We're trying to communicate and inspire practice in everyone, just as a supportive part of our community. Okay, so what are the three hard ways that people try to do this? The first hard way, transcend the separate self through intensive meditation. I shared about that personally earlier. So by focusing on transcendent states and bypassing the ego only, we end up avoiding the root cause of our confusion and anxiety. And meditative practices actually can amplify that anxiety, kind of like what happened to me. When we actually ignore the ego or the separate self's desire for belonging, recognition, and success, what happens? The ego tends to fight back with a vengeance, right? We actually, in the unique self-emergence, we integrate these needs. Let me tell you an example. So Laura is a good example of this. She was one of the clients that Claire worked with, and she was a craniosacral therapist where you work with the fluid in the spine for healing. And when she worked with her clients, she really tried to overcome her lack of confidence in her healing ability by jumping from one training program to another, hoping that her insecurity would go away through these different techniques. Through the unique self-emergence process, though, she became aware of her tendency, her unconscious tendency to avoid her difficult feelings, to avoid her feelings in general. So this awareness that she learned in unique self-emergence enabled her to slow down and find her center and actually feel them. As a result, she became a better healer because she could, by feeling her own difficult feelings, she could actually connect with and feel her clients and what they needed for their healing. So, in parallel, she worked through her own process of transformation in unique self-emergence. She learned to apply it with her clients. So she facilitated her clients facing their difficult feelings and emotions, which enabled them to actually transform in a more sustainable way. Okay, so she overcame the hard way, the first hard way, transcend the ego through intensive meditative practice. The second hard way, many of us in the US do this, I don't know what it's like in Europe, but endless therapy, okay? Talk therapy. What happens, right? In endless therapy, we rehash the same stories over and over to the therapist. And when we do that without a connection to our heart and our body, we may end up understanding the stories better and maybe improving them, but we don't heal the deeper layers. We actually don't connect with what happens in the body and the heart. And so without connecting the talk therapy to a larger source of compassion and a bigger sense of identity that includes the body, the heart, and includes the cosmos, we can never heal, truly. Right? Also, as long as we identify with the separate self, trying to fix and heal the separate self, there's no healing possible. So let me give you an example, Philip. So Philip was a dedicated family therapist, and he wanted to incorporate a spiritual dimension to his therapy practice, so he came to unique self-emergence. Because for many years, despite his training as a therapist, he found his clients would just continually get stuck in this cycle of overanalyzing their experiences without making genuine progress. So they improved their understanding, he was able to talk them through it, but wasn't able to access deeper layers. So he realized through unique self-emergence that endless analysis is not enough. And so he incorporated spiritual principles from this program and also the practices of unique self-emergence with his therapy approach, and which enabled him to really connect with the body and the heart in this larger sense of compassion, right? That actually he could invite in to work with his clients. And it's in a certain sense a transpersonal, for sure, transpersonal therapy practice is what it became. So this shift that he incorporated allowed him to catalyze healing that actually lasted with his clients, right? And also just the permanent evolutions of his practice. It would just continually continue to grow instead of being stagnant. So that was the second hard way that people tend to do this, endless therapy. The third hard way that people seek aliveness, meaning, and purpose is actually through continuous activism. So, many of us dedicate ourselves to causes that we really care about, we're really passionate about, a higher purpose, political action, conservation, community building, right? Many of us found that that's actually what makes us really energized and excited, right? Now, while continuous activism makes us feel energized for a while, what happens? Without a solid ground of stillness and a center, a firm center that is within ourselves, we actually risk burning out. It's a very common phenomenon in the activist world, burnout, right? Our action comes from anxiety and emptiness instead of something more profound. And we oftentimes, as a result of being burned out, we lose track of what is the vision here? What am I trying to do? We lose touch with our wisdom and we do things that we regret, etc. Right? And even at some point, we oftentimes find ourselves confused and overwhelmed. I know that when I lived in Nigeria, I was also in the Peace Corps, and I lived in Nigeria volunteering for leadership in the poorest areas of Nigeria. And I was confused and overwhelmed. What am I doing here? At some point, I burned out. And I was unable, and this is about me all of a sudden again, is unable to cope with the pain of the world, right? And so that's what happens when we get stuck in continuous activism and we're not really connected with ourselves. So unique self-emergence enables spiritual seekers in continuous activism to discover the deep ground of their being and clarify that actually we don't have to heal the whole thing, right? We actually focus on, well, what is mine to do in the context of this larger vision? And that's where I actually focus my attention. That's our unique risk, okay? So I'll share with you another example. Miriam, this is an interesting story that I heard. I won't go into all the details, but she worked for the United Nations. She was so committed as a change agent, so passionate about driving global change, so much so that she poured herself into her work and was driven by this relentless pursuit to make a difference and provide, and to actually support a global governance, right? The UN is really an attempt to bring global civilization to the fore, right? What happened though is these constant demands and pressures on her really began to take a toll. She found herself increasingly overwhelmed with a lot of bureaucratic work and administrative work and just overwhelmed in general, and disconnected from her purpose and struggled to keep up her inspiration. What am I doing here again? And she kind of lost touch of it. At several points, she found herself overworked and unsure of what she was here to do, fueled by anxiety and leading towards burnout. Thankfully, she met Claire and began going through unique self-emergence. And she found a turning point that by activating or accessing her inner stillness, it wasn't taking her away from her activism out there. Actually, it fueled it, it enabled it, right? So there was a sustaining quality to the inner stillness that she was lacking, that she learned through unique self-emergence. So she was able to access her deeper purpose and find the source of her energy, and also find her wisdom, right? And be able to organize herself to focus on what she needed to focus on more and let go of the other things, right? She found a balance that enabled her to revitalize herself personally and professionally, right? So in this dynamic balance, she was a great example of how unique self-emergence can really bring unique self into the activist experience, right? So those are the three hard ways that people attempt to do it, and how unique self-emergence helps to kind of fill in the gaps, right? So you might be asking, well, wait a minute, what is unique self-emergence? What actually happens there? And so we're going to go into the more specifics on how do we activate aliveness? How do we find deeper meaning and purpose through unique self-emergence, through the practices? So Claire is going to share about the 3 pillars of unique self-emergence. Claire, take it away.
Thank you, David. Wonderful. Yeah, so let's talk about those 3 pillars. What are they? What are these 3 major pillars? We call them pillars because they energize and they address those 3 core questions we've already articulated. Who am I? What is the source of my aliveness? What's the meaning and what's the purpose of life, of my life, my unique self? So I'm going to give you now some examples of the main practices, the core practices that we use that address this quest for aliveness, meaning, and purpose. And what we guarantee is that whether or not you ever go through our process if you take any of these practices, if you invest yourself in them, they will help wake you up as unique self. They will activate. The process is wonderful because it's a set, and it's an activation of many things together, and it's already been done, right? If you wanted to take it, you wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. But if you took any of these practices and started to bring them into your life consistently, I guarantee that they will activate your aliveness. They will give you a sense of meaning and purpose in your life. So let's start with the first pillar, to activate our aliveness. How do we do that? Well, one of the first things that we do in the unique self process is that we hone in on the unique risk, on your unique risk. That's actually because when you know what's yours to do, when you're clear on that, you become much less available for many things that are not used to do. And that frees a lot of energy. So knowing your no's is just as important as knowing your yes, so to speak. So doing this early in the process brings a lot of focus in and frees a lot of energy, activates your aliveness. Another thing that we do early in the program is to learn to recognize who we are not, which is what we call our false self. And the false self, in essence, is the false personality that we created as we grew up in order to get the love, the safety, and the belonging that we needed. And over time, this personality solidifies and becomes a set of coping patterns that we're trapped in, that keeps us small, and often are not even adapted to whom we've become and what we need to do. So through mindfulness and self-observation practices, we learn about our false self. We start to gain some perspective. What used to be behind us and we were identified to becomes actually visible, and we can distance ourselves from it. And that's a very important step in reclaiming our vitality, our aliveness. And within the scope of that particular practice of learning to be with our full self, we incorporate a practice of self-compassion. Self-compassion is key to growing up, is key to healing the false self. It's you can look at that practice of learning to recognize the false self as a two-winged practice. One wing is mindfulness, awareness, and the other wing is self-compassion. If there's no self-compassion, the awareness is not going to work by itself. We need to learn with our brokenness. We need to learn to be with our pain, with our failure, with our smallness, with our disappointment. And this process of being with our pain and seeing it, awareness and self-compassion, mind and heart, this process is one of the healing and liberating practice that we are that we introduce early in the process, and that is going to be with you your whole life. So it's a very important one. Other practices that activate our aliveness are those that explore our unique shadow. Your unique shadow is a beautiful distinction that Marc Gafni does in the Unique Self teachings. And it points to your unlived life, the life that your unique self is meant to live, that is still in shadow. And so in order to tap into that trapped energy, which when liberated becomes the source of your aliveness, is through illuminating our unique configuration of lines and circles, which is what we call the masculine and feminine qualities that make up our unique self. So by going through practices that help shine a light on how these qualities show up in us, these lines and circle qualities, which ones need to come online more, which ones are acting out in some distorted shadow fashion. By looking at this, we are able to liberate some of the energies that are blocked through practices and access them, these lines and circles, with more integration and flow in order to activate our aliveness. Other practices about activating our aliveness are around accessing the ground of true self. Any practice that, such as meditation, chanting, prayer, contemplation, any practice that is going to cultivate or anchor into true self is going to bring a source. Is going to reveal our source of aliveness. It is like plugging into the energy of the cosmos when we go in or we open our heart to the second person of God, or when we contemplate the beauty of the universe and become that beauty. All of this. And so there's a lot of practices in the process that are about cultivating, anchoring into true self. So these are the main practices that we use in that first pillar to activate our aliveness in the unique self-emergence process. And any of these practices, I invite you to explore. They will help you cultivate your sense of aliveness. The second pillar in the process is about discovering the meaning of our life. And here we build on the initial work that we did around releasing that strong identification to our false self by introducing the Enneagram. And by learning about our Enneagram type, we can learn to transcend that personality and evolve it in service to our unique gifts. So learning about the evolutionary path of our Enneatype, and that's available anywhere. You don't have to do the process to actually dig into this beautiful system. That's a big aspect of tapping into one's unique gifts and finding more meaning in our life. Another important practice that we use with regards to accessing the meaning of your life is writing our sacred autobiography. And I'm sure that many of you here have touched in that practice through the practice groups of One Mountain. So in this particular practice, we write the story of our unique self. And we write it through the lens of post-tragic consciousness. So we learn to go from pre-tragic to tragic to post-tragic consciousness, a perspective in which our wound becomes our sacred medicine. So in other words, we learn to mythologize our story and depathologize it. That's when our wound becomes the medicine. Another important practice in this second pillar is the practice of being in conversation with the universe. So there's prayer. Prayer is a beautiful way of conversing with God, the universe, source, whichever way you call it. We learn to recognize the synchronicity of life, how the universe whispers in our ears and guides us, and how we're always in conversation. So we, through intention and practices that really allow us to partner with the universe, we learn to take our place as an emerging, unique expression of it. So a good way to start this is to engage in prayer regularly. There are many ways. So just talking to God can be another way. I strongly invite you to try this if you haven't yet. Clarify your purpose is our third pillar. And the practices in that category are practices such as confessing your greatness, which is also another practice that many of you probably know. It's a classic unique self practice that Dr. Marc Gafni has given us. It's one of my favorite practices, and we're going to practice it in a little while. So yeah, the essence of this practice is about accessing your memories and accessing a memory of a moment when you felt fully alive and connected with your essence and clear about what was yours to do and who you truly are. And we're going to practice it in a moment. Yeah, another practice that's really important here is knowing where you are and where you are in the sense of in what consciousness you are, in which consciousness, in which self we stand. So unique self-consciousness is actually the only consciousness in which we're in relationship with the whole, and therefore there is purpose. If I'm stuck in separate self-consciousness, I am confused about my purpose. I'm confused. I'm not identified to who I truly am, so I can't access my true purpose. If I'm in a blissful state of true self, there is no purpose. I'm blissed out. There is no purpose. I just am. It's only by discerning whether I'm in separate self, true self, or unique self that my purpose becomes clear. So that's a really important checkpoint. It's a sort of practice. And finally, and that in some way is the ultimate practice that we offer in the process. And we have a specific set of practices that lead us to being able to access this this place. We learn to ask what the universe needs from us, from essence, at any moment. So by practicing anchoring in true self and asking the universe what it needs, we activate our unique response ability. And this last point is actually what we learn to clarify all through the process and all through the other practices. What does the universe need from me now? And as you know, you probably recognize this question because it's one of the beautiful practices that Dr. Marc Gafni has offered us through the unique self teachings. So that's it. These are the three pillars, and the process itself is made of 4 modules: wake up, grow up, clean up, and show up. And in those modules, through those modules, we gradually and systematically access all these transformations in the course of 12 months in community with others. And as such, it's a linear process because you move from one module to the next, but it's also a circle. As I said, once you've gone through the process once and all the modules and practices become psychoactive, and so it's kind of a process that continues to evolve. It's actually spiralic. It goes, it's linear and it's circular at the same time. So it's evolving. Yeah, so I think that's a wide review of all of our practices. At least I probably haven't shared all of them, but they're just the core ones. And any of these practices taken alone will activate your aliveness, sense of meaning and purpose. So I really encourage you to start anywhere and see for yourself. So we're going to, and I want to thank you for sticking with us because I know we're over time, and I hope that was helpful to you. And to wrap it up, I'm going to take you through a confession of greatness practice, a short one. And then we'll be able to share, and we'll close slowly. We'll move slowly to our close. So let's take a few deep breaths. It was a lot of words, a lot of things to take in from both David and I. So take a few deep breaths and yeah, slowly come present to your body. Become aware of your breathing and just take two more breaths into silence, coming home to the body. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and think of a time when you offered something to someone or did something or said something that felt completely right. It was exactly the appropriate response to what was needed in the moment. It could have been a joyful situation. It could have been a difficult situation. It could be a public moment or a very private moment. Regardless, and in any case, you knew you were exactly at your place, at your right place. It felt like you were doing the right thing at the right time, and you were totally in your experience of fullness. You were in your unique self. It felt very simple, obvious. Can you recall a moment and access the fullness of that moment? Tap into the energy of that moment. And even call in that energy right now in your belly, in your heart, in your mind's eyes, recreating that state within you of total unique selfness. And as you do so, just realize that this is you. This is your essence. It doesn't matter what moment of greatness it is. You know, it's you. It's your essence. You're offering one of your unique gifts in that moment. And you may think that what you did was anyone could have done, but in that moment, it was your unique response to this particular moment, to this particular demand of the universe. And you showed up. And as you relieve this moment now, you're tapping into the felt sense of that essence, of your unique self, of your unique medicine. And feel how natural it feels. And reveal in that. And let it circulate in every cell of your body. Just bask in it. Bathe in it. Feel pleasure. Feel the pleasure of being you. And savor it. So I invite you now to share in the chat box. We're going to play some music. And if you can, try and you can share the story. But if you can just write about the aftertaste of that experience, that's enough. The felt sense of your uniqueness. You could start the sentence by, the essence of my greatness is, boom, boom, boom. the essence of my uniqueness is sweetness, for example, service, whatever is true for you. I invite you to write in the chat box now. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And, when we confess our greatness, we're not saying we're greater than another person. We're inviting everyone into their own unique greatness. That's the beauty of unique self-teaching, right? And so we can democratize awakening, democratize enlightenment, and democratize greatness. Thank you for listening and participating. And speaking of greatness, I will turn it to Krista Josefa to bring us home. Krista.
Thank you, David. That was a lovely bridge. Speaking of greatness, thank you so much. Wow, what a journey, right? An amazing, beautiful, unique self emergence journey. And we can feel the depth of the unique self, the depth of the unique self institute, as well as the unique self symphony, which was what I was about to say. The Institute, which exists for a long time, I think over a decade, but has been founded on deep research, but also deep practice of Claire, of Barbara, of Marc, so many people that are so deeply immersed in this practice. So this is a rare opportunity to really study and practice together at the same time. So that unique self emergence process is going to start in the fall. So please put the link again in the chat box. And if you feel called to really dive deep into your own unique self awakening, please do sign up. Claire spoke beautifully also about many ways to practice awakening our unique self. And one way she said was prayer. And as a way to connect to our true self and from that place to our unique self. And I just want to let everyone know that we actually pray together as a community every day, and everyone is welcome to join. You don't even have to become a member. It is recommended, of course. But we pray every day at 7:30 a.m. Eastern time, and in the weekend at 8 a.m. Eastern time. And all you need to do, I'm going to share actually the links in the chat box, but also we will share them in an email later. The link is a link to a WhatsApp group, and that's where we post every day the Zoom link, and also if there's any changes in time, which is very rare, but sometimes it happens. So you can join that WhatsApp group, and then you'll get updates there. And the prayer we do together are evolutionary Hebrew chants, and we also share a prayer booklet which has all the chants and their meaning, and you can practice yourself and you'll learn very, very quickly. They're not that hard. So it's a beautiful place to be in community, to be in prayer, to practice together. So yeah, please join us there. The final thing I want to share with everyone is that as a unique self symphony, we are also creating every week from these live teachings. Of course, normally we have Dr. Marc Gafni here with us, and then we make a transcript of the teaching, and then Elena does a beautiful edit on those transcripts, and she publishes them on, well, we as a team publish them on Substack. So we have a Substack for the Center for World Philosophy and Religion. There's a lot of other beautiful essays that Kirsten posts there. So yeah, let's just take a look at that, so we all know what it looks like and where to find it. I will actually also share that link, or maybe someone can help me putting that link in the chat box. Here you can see, actually I have to go here, the Substack, and it looks so gorgeous. Here on the top you'll always see the latest episode that we posted here. Here you see the Eye of Value course that is starting in September that we spoke about earlier. Really recommended, beautiful study place. Then the next section is One Mountain Many Paths, which where we are right now. So every weekly episode will be published here. It's a beautiful way to slowly read the Dharma and really receive it at a whole new level. And here you can see the different essays. Every Tuesday, Kirsten posts a beautiful additional essay, and we've also begun to publish actually our podcast here. For those of you who don't know it yet, One Mountain Many Paths, this weekly broadcast is also published as a podcast, so it's available on Spotify, Apple, and here you can also see it on Substack. So that is pretty amazing. One thing we want to encourage and invite everyone to do is, if you read a post, you can actually register for free. So that way you'll make sure that you receive the updates. If you have an iPhone, you can also install the Substack app on your phone. I think it will become available for Android as well soon. Here you can see an invitation to upgrade to paid. So all of these Substack articles are completely free, as is the One Mountain Many Paths, as is our daily prayer. But we do ask everyone to please contribute as much as we can, so we can together as a symphony build this revolution. So one way of doing that is upgrading here to paid. It's only $9 a month, and that is a beautiful way to just say yes to this revolution and to participate in it and to support it. Another way to do that is, if you scroll all the way down, there is an opportunity to place a comment. Here you can like the article, and then you can place a comment. You can read other people's comments. You can like other people's comments and reply. This is a beautiful way to really show ourselves to the world as a community and connect with each other. So I just wanted to show everyone this beautiful place. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Yeah, so please participate in that, and I'm looking forward to see your comments there. Now, as we do every week, let's close with a revolutionary dance party ceremony blessing. We're going to feel the digital intimacy that is possible through the screen, and it's really possible. What we're going to do is promote everyone as panelists, and if you accept, you will be going out and in automatically. You don't have to do anything, and that way you can turn on your video camera. Please do not be shy. I know there's always so many more people that actually come on the screen, which I can see, so you think you're hiding, but you're not really hiding. So don't be shy. Come on the screen, show your beautiful, unique self face, and let's dance together.